So now back to our project. With our new knowledge of primuv, we determined that we can get any point along this spline by using the primuv function. And so this is the point that's plugged into this attribute wrangle, and we will make this point look at our curve. So let's set a vector pose, and this is where we will store our position on the curve. And we will say primuv, and we will point to the geometry, which is our second input, which is input 1, and we want to grab the p attribute, so the position. The primitive number will be 0, so if I were to go to my curve and turn on the primitive display, we can see that we get just a 0 along the whole curve right over here. Okay, so this will point at primitive 0. And for the position, we will just turn this into a channel. So we will type ch, and in between parentheses, I will just type u. So this will be the u value of the uv coordinates. Okay, and if I create this channel, let's also set our point position to be on this position that we created. So p equals pos. And now we can see it snapped right to the beginning of the curve. And if I animate this u value, we can see that it nicely travels along the curve. So let's maybe set a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline, so frame 1, and I'll set a keyframe for 0. I'll hold down Alt and just left click, and maybe go to frame, let's say 100, and let's say 150. And this will be a value of 1. I will also hold down Shift and left click. So in my graph editor, I can grab these keyframes and I'll just make this linear. And this will just ensure that our simulation will have a consistent look along the whole curve. Okay, so now if I look at my point, it travels along the curve. And we can use this point now. So I will grab this, press Ctrl C to copy. And I will drop down an object merge and merge this over here. So this will be PT. And I'll duplicate this object merge. And this will be my geo. And I will grab this geo that we created earlier. And I will just paste this inside this object merge. So now I can just simply grab this geometry and let's untemplate the curve, and we have the point that's animated along the spline. So I will just simply do a copy to points and use this as the template point. And now if I preview this, we have our skull animating along the curve. So if I template the curve, we can see now this is how it looks. The problem here is that the skull isn't aligned to the curve. And this is because this animated point doesn't have a normal. So we need a normal that's pointing along this curve. And we can grab this normal from the curve the same way that we grabbed the position on the curve. So for this curve, after the resample, I will drop down a polyframe. And for all the points, I want to generate a normal that points basically from one point to the next point. So if I turn off normal name and for tangent name I set this to be n, and I will use as style first edge. If I turn on the normal, we can see now that we have normals that point in the direction that the curve is going. So if I press D and let's maybe go to our guides and scale the normal, let's maybe just, and you don't have to do this, but this is just to showcase this. I will just increase the length of this resample, and now we can see we have normals that point nicely along the curve. So we want the point to inherit this normal. So if we go back over to our attribute wrangle, we can also now create another vector variable that it's going to be n, or maybe to make this less confusing, let's just name this vector nrm. So this will be normal. And do the same thing here. I'll in fact just copy paste this. And instead of the p attribute from the curve, we will need the n. And then I will set the n to be this nrm vector that we created. So now when I look at my point and turn on the normal, we can see that it grabs the normal from the curve and it's grabbing it from the position that we specified, which is this U channel. All right. So from this U channel, whatever value is here is going to grab the position that it has on the curve and also the normal value that the curve has at that position. Okay, so now we can see we have the normal working, and if I go back to my copy to points, now our skull is facing in the wrong direction, but it's aligned to the curve, as we can see. And we can reverse this alignment by simply saying that this is equal to, so our normal will be negative NRM, and this just reverses the normal. So now this geometry that is animated along the curve can be used as a source to drive our smoke and particle simulations. But next we will create a camera, and then we can make some changes to this curve now that we have the skull animation working, so we can actually preview how our animation will look. And I'll drop a null here after my copy to points, and I'll name this to src for source.